Pour you the song. Pour you in the song.
Yes, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please stand for the arrival of Her Excellency, the President of Barbados. Please remain standing as I invite the Reverend Alison Carter of the James Street Methodist Church to bless this evening's proceedings.
Let us go to God in prayer. Let us pray. God of justice, God of grace, we acknowledge that you are the most high and eternal God. We bow before you with hearts bursting with joyful thanksgiving and gratitude for who you are and what you have done, and for all that you are yet to do. As we gather in your presence to reopen and to rename this old Supreme Court complex for the glory of your name and for the well-being of our nation, this affirms our conviction that the proceedings of this court require divine wisdom and guidance. We give thanks to you, Almighty God, for those whose hands have completed this new work, and for those who managed the project. In this safe, secure, modern location, we pray for all who shall enter these doors for service and who seek justice, for families with disputes with each other, for people going through trauma, for those who are victims of crimes and for members of their family, for all persons seeking redress for civil matters, that all may find a peaceful resolution. Lord, in this place where the accused and the accuser meet for an impartial hearing and rightly delivered verdict, even as the final judgment is declared, whether it is one of freedom or incarceration, let there be peace, for here the common good is to be preserved. Thank you that laws govern our actions and interactions in this nation. Thank you for a heritage of freedom and a sense of responsibility. We pray for those who shall serve as marshals, law clerks, prosecutors, and those who work behind the scenes in the court office. May all officers keep the due diligence, continuing to facilitate a safe space for trials. We pray for attorneys at law who stand at the bar to plead causes, and for all magistrates who enter these courts of law to preside, uphold the Constitution, and dispense justice. God, may the principles of accountability, integrity, impartiality, and independence, free from improper influence in exercising judicial function, as well as the upholding of the rule of law, continue to be the hallmarks of the system of governance of these courts of law in our nation. Lord, protect judicial independence. God of justice, we confess that our nation is wrestling with persistent and difficult issues of crime and violence, which reflects how much the moral and spiritual norms in society have declined. These impact the number of arraignments in the system of justice, which appear more complex because of the nature and execution of crimes. In this place, Lord, where oaths and affirmations will once again be made, in this place where guilt or innocence is determined based on evidence and the discernment of truth, in this place where the testimony of witnesses is given, evidence is weighed, and judgments are proclaimed. In this place, Lord, where a verdict must be reached, our plea, Lord, is to save our justice system and keep truthfulness at the forefront of every trial. We pray for the Honorable Sir Patterson Cheltenham, Chief Justice of Barbados, the Honorable Dale Marshall, the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, and the Honorable Wilfred Abrahams, Minister of Home Affairs, whose current ministry is directly linked to matters which emanate from these courts. Lord, give to them the grace to complete all tasks under their purview, especially that of reform and rehabilitation. We pray for the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, our Prime Minister, and Dame Sandra Prunella Mason, President of Barbados, that, Lord, your wisdom and grace will attend them, and that in their positions of authority and influence, they may continue to promote justice, freedom, and peace for all as they serve with compassion. Our prayer today is also a prayer of blessing and dedication. This historic building, a constant presence on Coleridge Street for decades, bears powerful witness, God, to our hope for order and decency. This is the place where truth and mercy meet. This is the place through its appearance has changed, justice will be done. May these courtrooms be filled with the confidence of your wisdom, the generosity of your mercy, and the power of your love. Bless this nation we love so dearly, and those whom have chosen to guide her path. May peace come in our lifetime, and may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is our prayer in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen and amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Allison of the James Street Methodist Church. Please be seated. Your Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason, President of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Sir Patterson Cheltenham, Chief Justice, Honorable Santia Bradshaw, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, the Honorable Dale Marshall, Senior Minister and Attorney General of Barbados and Minister of Legal Affairs, other members of Cabinet, His Honor Senator Reginald Farley, President of the Senate, His Honor Arthur Holder, Speaker of the House of Assembly, Sir David and Lady Simmons, Sir Henry and Lady Ford, Justices of the Court of Appeals and Judges of the High Court, members of the Senate and the House of Assembly, permanent secretaries, and other senior government officials, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Sharon Lynch, and it is my pleasure to serve as your Master of Ceremonies for this event, which will see the reopening and renaming of the old Supreme Court complex, a historic building which has been renovated, refurbished, and restored in keeping with its rich history and its location on this UNESCO World Heritage Site. This evening's ceremony has been coordinated and is being hosted by the Office of the Attorney General, and my first task is to call on the Permanent Secretary in that ministry, Ms. Yvette Goddard, to deliver welcome remarks. Permanent Secretary.
Your Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason, President of Barbados, Honorable Mia Amor Motley, Prime Minister, Honorable Sir Patterson Cheltenham, Chief Justice, Honorable Santia Bradshaw, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, Honorable Dale Marshall, Senior Minister, Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, other members of Cabinet, Honorable His Honor Senator Reginald Farley, President of the Senate, His Honor Arthur Holder, Speaker of the House, members of Parliament, members of the Judiciary, senior public officers, specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Before proceeding, I first wish to recognize our distinguished honorees, Sir David Simmons and Sir Henry Ford, their spouses, Lady Simmons and Lady Ford, members of their family, and their special guests. It is my pleasure to welcome you all here this evening for this very special occasion, when we can formally recognize the return to operation of this complex. In October 2020, the government of Barbados agreed that the Crown Properties Rejuvenation Project should commence with the restoration of 9 buildings, including the former Registration Office and the former Supreme Court. While the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance has the overall responsibility for the renovation, including financing, the Design and Implementation Unit, formerly Project Office of my ministry, was consulted to provide the project and contract management along with oversight of the renovations. This required the teams to work closely together along with the various contractors. The culmination of this project is an example of successful collaboration between government departments, and which we hope will continue. The renovations of the old Supreme Court buildings and the old Registration Department will provide accommodation for a number of departments that fall under the Office of the Attorney General. I think you've seen them on the screen: the Community Legal Services, Coroner's Court, Juvenile Court, the Law Reform Commission, plus Magistrates Court. As in so many other endeavors in recent years, the teams faced their share of hurdles, not least of which was the COVID-19 pandemic. This required long hours, many meetings, and several changes to plans. Nonetheless, I am heartened that they persevered through it all to bring us to this point. Employing an estimated 200 skilled laborers and artisans, the main contractor, Birkin Construction, along with the members of the design team, most of whom are here today, accomplished what most people thought was impossible. The hard work and commitment of the teams dovetailed well with the Office of the Attorney General's overarching interest in providing for improved working conditions for staff, as well as facilities that can offer an environment for expanded conduct of legal and judicial matters. As Permanent Secretary, I am immensely satisfied that through the completion of this project, we have been able to improve the work life of some members of staff, and that my team will have had a significant input in making a positive impact on the work of the judicial system. And now, here we are to celebrate these accomplishments, that spirit of cooperation and collaboration, and to recognize the contribution of outstanding leaders in our community. In the course of the evening, you will hear a lot about the past, present, and future of these premises. As you tour the buildings, and as you mingle and reflect on the old buildings and versus the new, you may wish to consider that this will all and should all redound to the benefit of future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, once more, I welcome you and invite you to enjoy the evening's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, P.S. Goddard. And as you just heard, the restoration of this complex is a proud occasion for the Attorney General's office, as it was the design and implementation unit of that office that was responsible for the management and oversight of the renovations that have resulted in these attractive new premises. So here now to give his remarks is the Attorney General himself and Minister of Legal Affairs, the Honorable Dale Marshall.
Your Excellency, Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, our beloved Prime Minister, the Lord Chief Justice, Sir Patterson, our very special honorees, Sir Henry, Sir David, Lady Simmons and Lady Ford, and your families, senior ministers, other members of Cabinet, Your Honor, the President of the Senate, Reginald Farley, Reverend Allison, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased that so many of you have joined me this evening for this event, the reopening of the old Supreme Court complex, and its renaming in honor of Sir Henry and Sir David, two titans of the legal profession and former Attorneys General of Barbados. My place in the batting order is one where I can neither repeat and neither should I seek to presage those things that will be said. But I hope you'll forgive me if I spend a few minutes reflecting on the excellent work that has been done on the restoration and rehabilitation of these buildings, which has returned them to a splendor that I don't think any of us here have ever seen them in. When we visited this site just 2 years ago, these buildings were in a near derelict state, having been abandoned with the opening of the new judicial complex over a decade ago. As often happens with the ascension of the new, the old are left forgotten to decay. You will therefore appreciate my elation at being associated with this restoration. I must tell you that these buildings hold many fond memories for me. I went from being a part-time legal clerk to an attorney at law to a QC, all within the environs of these buildings. I remember, and you'll permit me these short recollections, I remember that before we had a separate and dedicated land registry, the deeds were recorded and processed downstairs of the building right here behind me. And it will surprise some of you to know that the details of each deed were entered by the clerks by hand in the huge registers. And the actual deeds, before photocopying became a thing of some currency, every single word was written out in registers. And I remember, Lady Simmons, your legal assistants like Charlie Crawford. I remember David Blackman and Diana Greenidge and Darnley Welch. And the upstairs senior clerks like Velma Morris, Trevor Bino, Bob Simmons, Miss Weeks, Yvonne Payne, the wonderful Avril Seeley, and I remember you, Lady Simmons, our favorite registrar, Maria Dare McCormack. But this was also our company's registry and our trademark registry. So all of our companies and trademarks were filed downstairs in this same place. And Prime Minister, everything that is now scattered across various sites of Barbados was all done at Coleridge Street. I remember doing title searches as a legal clerk to George Payne in this building, and later as an attorney at law, I, like you, Prime Minister, was at home in these courts. In the days when many of the noble traditions of the bar were still honored and valued. You remember those days when seniority at the bar was a precious and revered thing, and any matter with a silk was called first. There was no court in which a young Dale Marshall or a young Mia Motley could expect to receive an audience with a judge before a Queen's Counsel. And the number one court to your left was the home of one of our high courts, and at the same time the home of our divisional court and our Court of Appeal. At this site, many foundations as attorneys at law were laid and built upon. I know that it is as true for me as it is for many of you in attendance. But hundreds of years before us, this site was the place from which our yet unborn nation was governed. This old town hall building, constructed in the 1700s without a single piece of steel in its walls or foundations, was the home of our House of Assembly. And I suppose it's a curious coincidence, it was also the jail. And some of you will know that the original cells are still to be found under the number one court. As a side note, I did try to arrange to have these cells made ready for tours tonight, but my enthusiasm was not shared by the other members of our project team. The history of this important site, therefore, is the lens through which I view this evening's proceedings. This history made it imperative that these buildings be brought back into the service of our country. And I'm not at all embarrassed to say that for me, Prime Minister, this restoration is symbolic too of the restoration of our country's fortunes and stability. My role this evening is not to render any vote of thanks, but I feel I must compliment the personnel from the following firms for their indefatigable efforts. Steinbach Management Services, providing on-site project management. Gillespie and Steel Associates Limited for its fine architectural services. Cooper Kaufman Consultancy Limited for its work as a quantity surveyor. A2B Consultants, Mechanical, Electrical and Plumbing Services. Technic Structure Consultants, Structural Engineering Services. And the main contractors who have done an absolutely amazing job, Burkan Construction, Inc. None of this would have been possible, though, without the extraordinary support of the Prime Minister, who, as Minister of Finance, holds the purse strings. And if she wonders why I'm flattering her, it's because there are a few more projects I'd like to see done. Prime Minister, let me thank you for believing that this was a worthy project and for not hesitating to provide the substantial resources to see it to the point where we are today. Work on the Old Town Hall is still ongoing and is scheduled to be completed in March of next year. I want to tell you that much attention to detail has been given to the Old Town Hall building, so much so that every element of its history was researched by the design team, even down to its original color when it was built. And if you look to your left, the color of the building today is as close as possible to its coloring in the original 1700s as we could get. And for those of you who are not squeamish, I was informed that the paint in those days became that lovely pink through adding lots of animal blood. The project managers have assured me that a special air conditioning system has been designed for these buildings, which are soft stone and tend to hold moisture. This new system will ensure that there is no moisture retention, thereby promoting a mold-free environment. I have a special word for the magistrates and staff of District A Magistrates Court. When the Supreme Court was relocated to White Park Road, you remained in this location. And here, all of you worked under the most trying of conditions for many years. And when I did the site visit, I made you a solemn promise of new accommodation. And this evening, we give you this refurbished complex as your new home. Honoring my promise to you was very important to me. My permanent secretary has said that this complex will now house the Community Legal Services Commission, which will move from its current location at White Park Road. It will be the first home, Sir David, of your Law Reform Commission, a home that is much deserved. It will be the home of the Coroner's Court, the Traffic Court, and 2 District A criminal courts. When completed in March, the Old Town Hall will accommodate facilities for alternate dispute resolution, the Employment Rights Tribunal, as well as other facilities. On a general note, the completion of this complex has provided a much-needed facelift for this part of Bridgetown and complements the significant work that was undertaken on the old Jewish synagogue just a stone's throw away. This part of Bridgetown, Prime Minister, is well on its way to strengthening its status as a UNESCO World Heritage designation as historic Bridgetown and its garrison. I sincerely hope, too, that a public-private sector partnership, if not a fully private sector arrangement, can be forged to restore the beautiful Carnegie building that housed the public library. And I know that the Prime Minister has great plans for seeing that happen within the next few years. This complex, excluding the Old Town Hall, will today take on the joint names of Sir David and Sir Henry. They each, in their own way, bestrode the legal profession like the proverbial colossus. Each served this country faithfully and with aplomb as our Attorney General. I have personally benefited from their sage advice and drawn from the depth of experience and intellect. Barbados owes you both a debt of gratitude. And while I know that the honor was entirely yours to serve your country, I hope that our gesture here this evening will go some way in expressing a nation's thanks for your commitment to Barbados. Thank you both for allowing us to honor you in this way. Master of Ceremonies, good judgment and the effluxion of time would dictate that I bring my remarks to a close. My final words then must be left to the Ministry of Housing for facilitating this tremendous endeavor. I want to thank Minister Duguid. I see that he's not present, but he's clearly present in spirit, and Minister Sutherland for working tirelessly to help us get to where we are. I also want to thank especially what I call the project unit of the Office of the Attorney General. Let me tell you publicly how much your hard work in bringing us to this point is appreciated. I only hope that the Prime Minister does not deem you fit for higher duty and create a national project office, but if she did, I can think of no better team than this to get that ball rolling. Madam President, Prime Minister, my Lord Chief Justice, Sir Henry and Lady Ford, Sir David and Lady Simmons, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Marshall. The history lesson was indeed interesting. And when the entire complex is renovated and completed, as you heard, it will house a number of agencies. Among the well-appointed officers in the entire complex is expected to be one for none other than the Chief Justice of Barbados. And our next speaker will be none other than the Honorable Sir Patterson Cheltenham, Chief Justice of Barbados.
Your Excellency, the Most Honorable Dame Sandra Mason, I seek your permission to accept the protocol already established by the Master of Ceremonies. And if you nod like Homer, I will treat that as approval. There is before us a structure distinctly pleasing to the eye for those of us who have played our trade in these precincts. We can be forgiven for generating a pleasing smile. Into this new space, we will continue with the delivery of our traditional court services, and we will be joined for the first time with the Community Legal Service Department, the Law Reform Commission, the Employment's Right Tribunal. Within the old town hall, or as we have always known it, upstairs where the law library was located, together with court number 2, and latterly with 2 other courts, the suggestion was offered and accepted for the creation of space dedicated to alternative dispute resolution, a home for mediation with the appropriate breakout rooms, and a home for arbitration. In my capacity of Chief Justice, there is a nagging fear that if not implemented with dispatch, there's the real likelihood that old and inefficient methods of management of our court services will persist and detract from the attractive externalities offered by this remodeled building that will have all the makings of a tragedy. Our courts are designed to offer peace and security in the personal lives of citizens. They promote stability in the commercial world, discourage and punish unacceptable conduct, and provide balance in the affairs and operations of government. Simply put, courts matter. A more discerning and demanding public constantly and rightly poses pointed questions over the quality of service being meted out. They are the paymasters and have every right so to do. We must not and cannot reopen for business with a mindset and methods wedded to a dying past. Broadly, there are 2 ways that change can be effected in the court system. The first is evolutionary and incremental. It involves improving the current system in part by introducing new efficiencies and partly by securing greater state funding. Instinctively, judges and lawyers will prefer this approach. The real danger in this approach is that it is premised on a thesis, now seriously doubted, that the system is well tested and well proven. On this view, the way to restore acceptable levels of service is to invest in process improvement through a host of small tactical adjustments and refinements, and to automate inefficient manual processes. The second type of change is more radical. It requires the current setup or greater parts of it to be superseded swiftly rather than gradually. If technologies are involved, they should bring transformation rather than simply automating conventional processes. This view sees the system as irretrievably broken and the language borrowed from the Sale of Goods Act unfit for purpose. Change must be managed in the local context where it is directed. I came and I found some elements of the gradual approach and very little of the radical. Whatever school of thought one supports, the recurring element is change. It has to occur because the unrelenting march of technological innovation and the growing demands of our customers demand it. There are 2 areas immediately which I could think of. The Act governing the legal profession, which sets out to regulate the conduct of lawyers, was enacted 50 years ago when the word computer was not part of the lexicon or was in its infancy. That act cries out for immediate modernization to march with the times. Another illustration of inefficiency would be the old and inefficient method of running the traffic courts, with offenders spending precious time to receive a fine. This is simply obsolete and wasteful. There are other areas in need of redefinition and change to be addressed elsewhere. Our distinguished honorees, individually and collectively, represent excellence. Each one has distinguished himself as a lawyer and attorney general, and in one case, Mr. David, additionally as Chief Justice. I have known each from my early days at the bar. I came and saw them. I admired and respected them. They were formidable intellects, and as attorney generals, each populated the statute book with new, exciting, and thoughtful legislation. I extend, on behalf of the judiciary, our admiration to you and join in celebrating this signal and momentous occasion. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sir Patterson Cheltenham. As a child, one of my favorite things to do was visit the public library in the old Carnegie building located next door. And I remember that the car park, right where we are seated at the old Supreme Court, was the place my mother parked for our visits there. And also on the few occasions I actually got to go into Bridgetown. But while I am only familiar with the car park, this evening's featured speaker, like the two distinguished speakers before her, has a great knowledge of the workings as well as a vast experience inside these historic buildings as an outstanding attorney at law, Queen's Counsel or Senior Counsel, and former Attorney General of Barbados. I know that this is a proud and happy moment for the Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, to be able to deliver this evening's featured address. Prime Minister.
Your Excellency, Dame Sandra Mason, President of Barbados, Deputy Prime Minister Santia Bradshaw, Sir Patterson Cheltenham, Chief Justice, distinguished members of Cabinet, but please forgive me, everyone, if I say to the distinguished honorees, Sir Henry Ford and Lady Ford, Sir David Simmons and Lady Simmons, our special guests of honor, distinguished guests all. How do you repurpose the old and make it relevant and functional for today? You have heard from the Honorable Attorney General some of the history of this site, and it is significant to me that at every stage of our development in the postmodern history of Barbados, that this site has been pivotal to this country's development and to this country's stability. It tells a story as well, and one that we would do well to remember and to avoid in the future. Because as you heard from the Honorable Attorney General, the transition of the law courts from this site left this site to remain derelict and abandoned. I trust and pray that this evening's ceremony can be used as a metaphor for our development and for what is required of us. it became obvious to us when we determined that even though we were in the middle of an International Monetary Fund program, that once COVID hit, and once it was clear that that which would normally stimulate this economy, the arrival of visitors from far, was not going to be there, that we had to dig deep and we had to determine how best we would sustain each other in this difficult moment that the pandemic presented. The Honorable Attorney General was absolutely correct that the Cabinet then had to confront what could we do and how would we repurpose, in particular, existing structures, not just to provide employment to those who all of a sudden were without jobs and the capacity to sustain their families, but equally, how could we repurpose buildings to play a role in a modern Barbados befitting the times within which we find ourselves? It was clear to us that there had been an absence of the continuity required in the establishment of the home of the Judicial Center for the law courts to be able to carry along other aspects of the judicial system and to be able to treat to the conditions of those who were forced to work in the most difficult and awful conditions in the old magistrates' court. And if, like me and those who spoke before me, you had the distinct privilege of working in this complex, you would know that if the Honorable J.S.B. Dare returned today, before we started the work on this building, he would recognize every aspect of it and wonder how it was allowed to even deteriorate further from that which his memory would have reminded him. Ma'am, you also, along with Lady Simmons, would have served in this building behind us as registrar responsible for the conduct of the affairs of the courts and for the civil works necessary to be able to keep this country functioning in terms of its civil registry and the other things upon which the population depended on your intervention for in this complex. I think it is fair to say that what we have come here today to celebrate is not simply the renaming of these buildings, but a practice that must now become more ever present. In a country where we have seen the abandonment of so many of our buildings, from plantations to government buildings to private property, we must now ask ourselves, how do we repurpose buildings to be appropriate to the times in which we live and to serve our people in a more fundamental way? As fate would have it, I spent my day with the Ministry of Finance in retreat with the bankers. Because if this country is to move to the next level, then it is required not only for government to play the role that it did in terms of a countercyclical measure by investing in these capital projects at a time when no one else was investing in this economy, but it is now the time for the private sector to meet us toe-to-toe and to ensure that the investment in Barbados by Barbadians and foreigners in this nation can indeed double and go to the point where we can secure our growth in order to be able to ensure that there is a place and an opportunity for every Barbadian. It sounds strange because that's not what most people would have expected me to be speaking about today. But the investment, coupled with the careful administration of justice, coupled with the building of social capital, are all required to keep the balance which this nation needs to move through these very difficult and turbulent times within which the world finds itself. We hope that the ability to be able to expand the functioning of the legal system and the capacity of the judiciary to meet the needs of the population can be assured by ensuring that the physical accommodation and the digitization that is necessary to require efficiency can be made available so that the system works for the average Barbadian in ways that is seamless. The notion of delays cannot continue to be a characteristic of our judicial system. Justice delayed is truly justice denied. The government has made it clear that even in the conduct of the management of criminal cases, and especially after the further delay put on us by reason of 2 years of COVID, where the ability to conduct trials was severely constrained, that we hope that by the provision of additional members to the judiciary with the ability to focus on a dedicated matter on the criminal backlog, that we can truly bring people to justice within the time that is reasonable and acceptable by all. It has meant, therefore, that in addition to the 5 courts that we have had over the course of the last 3 years dedicated to the conduct of criminal cases, the government has agreed, as I announced a month ago, to 3 more additional temporary judges in order to reduce the backlog. It is unacceptable that 80% of the murder cases that lie before the court today to be heard in the High Court predate 2018. In other words, are longer than 5 years. In addition, we also accept that our ability to allow for commercial disputes to be resolved in quick time is absolutely essential if we are going to get the same level of investment that I spoke about just now to come in order to be able to fuel the growth of this country and to bring about stability for all of us. We established a commercial court, and I believe that it is important for us to ensure that both either through the conduct of the work in the commercial court or the pursuit through alternative dispute resolution, that persons who have difficulties with each other in the business of commerce can come and have their matters expeditiously completed. Our failure to achieve that will undermine Barbados's attractiveness and competitiveness as a jurisdiction within which people can truly invest and expect to get returns from their investment. And finally, there is the family court, which is dear to all of our hearts, and which, were it not for the conduct of or the redirection of funds that were necessary during the pandemic, we would have hoped to have had established already. But this is real life and real times. And even though we have not been able to bring the establishment of a single family court, removing that awful distinction between those who are married and those who are not married, belonging to an earlier time that should not now be characteristic of how we conduct our affairs in a modern, independent Republic of Barbados. We hope that we can keep that, AG, within the near future, the promise that we have made to ensure that there is a single family court, removing the difference between the magisterial jurisdiction and the High Court jurisdiction, and having an approach in the family court that is truly about the sustenance of the family and not just simply about the adversarial rights between the applicant and the respondent. The truth is, this country needs that example of completing the circle to preserve the family more than it has ever needed it before. And I say so conscious of the fact that there are aspects of our current life in this country that is challenging us, and that will require each and every one of us to play our part, whether from the perspective of law enforcement, whether from the perspective of judicial resolution of matters, or whether from the perspective of prevention of crime and the building of social capital. It cannot be that a Victorian approach to criminal justice or to punitive measures continues to be the characteristic functions of a Barbados penal system and judicial system and legal system in the third decade of the 21st century. I am happy that between the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Ministry of People Empowerment, both ministers, Abrams and Humphrey, will soon be in a position to deliver to the Parliament of Barbados modernized legislation for the handling of the protection of children and justice related to children in this country. It has taken too long for us to reach this point, but alas, we are at that point where a bill can become an act and become the subject of judicial management as we go forward. Similarly, I am happy that we are at a position where we need to reflect on aspects of our judicial system and of our penal system from the point of view that there is a simple principle. Those who are prepared to destroy the social capital of the country should also be required to repair the social capital of the country. So David, as a former Attorney General, would have done a significant amount of work in ensuring that we started the journey of penal reform by introducing things such as community service and different penalties that hitherto would not have been available to magistrates and judges in this country. But we must now go further. And to that extent, I hope, Attorney General, that we will be in a position to ensure that criminal penalties are reserved for those who truly commit crime, and that we stop fining and confining for every regulatory breach in this country, because it takes away from the seriousness of what the penalty of imprisonment ought to mean in this country. The notion that this was called a debtor's jail regrettably tells us that that is also an archaic concept that we have allowed to come into a modern Barbados with us, that we send people to prison for debt. It is true that there are those who argue that we send them really to prison for contempt of court, which is also true. But there must be other ways for us to ensure that people can pay their penalties without necessarily depriving them and by extension their families from a source of living in order to be able to sustain them as they go forward. When I refer to the destruction of social capital, there are too many projects needed to be done in modern Barbados that the activities and hours from those who have defiled the country and who have breached the social capital of the country in ways that are clearly patent, we can find for you to give back and to help us sustain and build the social capital of this nation. And I want simply to say that it is in the interplay of all of these things that we will get past the difficult moments within which we find ourselves. This country has too much to defend and too much to build. And the notion that persons can be on bail while 2 or 3 murders are before the law courts for their name is an unacceptable condition. And the government has therefore placed every single resource, Your Lordship, at your disposal to ensure the expeditious conduct of criminal trials in this country. Similarly, we have also boosted and will continue to boost the resources of the Barbados Police Service. The reality is that there is a case for institutional strengthening and training, and we have settled on the framework to ensure that those who are at the ranks from sergeant to senior superintendent and who may not benefit like some of their senior colleagues to overseas training should now be the beneficiary of residential training in situ in Barbados across the board to ensure that the institutional strengthening that is so necessary for the Barbados Police Service is given as a matter of urgency. We have also noticed with pleasure the efforts of the Barbados Police Service to reach out to the general public, recognizing that the deficiency in being able to boost their numbers will be corrected by ensuring that there is a coherent and strong drive to be able to ensure that the police service comes up to its full establishment and not operates as it has for many, many, many years at 200 or so below what the establishment allows. I can only appeal to Barbadians to say that there are many opportunities to those of you who want to serve in the Barbados Police Service for increased training and increased opportunities and a career that will in fact bring honor to you and your family. And I hope and pray that many more Barbadians will see this as a viable career as we go forward. My friends, Friday evening is really not supposed to be a place for long speeches. And there was a prime minister known to many of us who would say that Friday evening was his only opportunity to be admitted to the bar, having not had the distinction of being able to study and have a Bachelor of Laws. I do not intend, therefore, to prevent you from being able to ensure that those who do not have Bachelors of Laws can equally be admitted to a bar that is close by. We are in a place, and it is significant to me that the nephew of Bishop William Hart Coleridge had, in 1832, the ability to make this comment, which I am glad to say that we are not in a position to repeat with any accuracy today. That His Majesty's Council, the General Assembly, the judges, the juries, the debtors, and the felons all lived together in the same house. That was what a previous Barbados accommodated. But today, we have been able to separate and to ensure that there is no opportunity, I hope, for contamination between any of the categories to which I have just referred. Suffice it to say that this project here represents for us the continued upliftment and improvement of Bridgetown as our capital city. And I think you will agree that whether it is in these buildings which have been refurbished or in the establishment of Golden Square, which now stands as an appropriate memorial for those who fought for the liberation of this country's freedom, or indeed in the upgrading of the buildings for the Fairchild Street Terminal, where the vendors now have appropriate conditions within which to conduct their business, or the soon-to-be renovated Temple Yard, where our Rastafarian community have lived and in many instances worked, but without the benefit of water and electricity for a long period of time, or the soon-to-be refurbished River Bus Terminal, that our duty, and of course the Carnegie Building to which the Attorney General referred, our duty is to restore to Bridgetown a majesty in terms of how it appears and how it functions. We also hope that the Treasury Building will also be the subject of a soon also to have refurbishment to ensure that Bridgetown is not only a place where people work, but Bridgetown will also be a place where people can truly see as a place of accommodation again. It is therefore important that this refurbishment here sets a standard for what others in the vicinity will continue to do. And I do believe that the buildings which are now under the control of government, which were previously associated with CLECO, will soon also be the subject of refurbishment as we go forward. Before I end, I want to say simply to Sir Henry and to Sir David, this is truly deserving to both of you. You have spent your lives in defense of the law, but not only in defense of the law, and also in pursuit of the making of laws. And in you, therefore, there is that special confluence that has allowed us to see the law not as an instrument of oppression that it has been, regrettably, for so long in our postmodern settlement from 1625, but in our recent history as a tool of enfranchisement and a tool of empowerment for our people. You came to the practice of law at a time where the number of barristers perhaps didn't even reach 3 digits. And you distinguished yourself as Barbadians, not only recognizing that it was the practice of law that would make the difference in the lives of so many of our people, but it was equally also the making of laws and the perfecting of wrong things to make them right in another place that would also matter. Today, we come to say thank you to both of you. And both of you have spent more than 50 years in the practice of the law and in the defense of the law and in the empowerment of ordinary Barbadians. If we were to leave these premises and to ask the average Barbadian how you impacted on their lives, the stories would fill the rest of this evening. I have therefore the distinct honor of saying to you on behalf of a grateful nation and a grateful government, thank you, thank you, thank you. We hope that your family and those close to you will draw truly a level of pride reflective of the fact that it is not to everyone to have their contributions acknowledged. And perhaps, Madam President, that is why the Builders of Barbados project that we want to get off the ground is even all the more critical. Young people must know what it is to recognize that the contributions that have been made to build this nation have come at all levels and from all quarters of society. And our ability to say thank you through this naming ceremony is only one of the small measures that we take to highlight the efforts of those who have worked tirelessly to build Barbados to what it is today. I look forward to our being able to recognize others in this building, AG. You call the names of Ms. Greenidge and a whole host of Mr. Simmons and a whole host of other people who you and I know would have worked tirelessly. And I ask that different rooms in this complex assume the names of ordinary workers who made the life and functioning of this complex bearable on a daily basis. I look forward to equally participating in the naming ceremony for those persons who, through their efforts, were able to contribute in that way. All that is left, therefore, for me to do is to say thank you for coming and to say that out of the very, very difficult and worst places can come good things. This project was one of the immediate consequences of us being in a pandemic. That it has served to sustain over 200 families for the last 2 years, that it is now in a position to provide excellent accommodation for those who hitherto were working in difficult conditions, and that it also reminds those of us who want to help build this nation of the example of 2 men who, born in a pre-independence Barbados, worked to build a post-independence Barbados in the best way that they could through the protection of the rule of law and the use of the law as a tool of empowerment of our citizens. Let this stand, therefore, as an example to all as to what is possible when we put our heads together and work in a collaborative fashion, even when confronted with the greatest of difficulties. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Motley. And as we continue to congratulate and indeed say thank you to Sir David and Sir Henry, I invite Sir David to speak on behalf of both honorees.
Just get my bearings. Dame Sandra Mason, Your Excellency, the President of Barbados, Honorable Prime Minister, my Lord Chief Justice, Honorable Attorney General, members of the Cabinet, members of the Judiciary, President of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House of Assembly, and all of you else, all of you distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Sir Henry has asked that I read to you his remarks before I do my own. And this is what Sir Henry has written. It is indeed an honor to be recognized in such a tangible way for doing something that I enjoyed immensely. And I'm greatly honored to be sharing this recognition with my friend and colleague, Sir David Simmons. I truly never expected to see my name on this building, but it is with great humility that I accept the recognition. I thank you, Madam Prime Minister, and your Cabinet. I sincerely hope that long after we have departed, future generations will recognize our contribution to the legal profession and be motivated to be beacons for the profession. This is a profession that requires individuals of the highest ethical and moral standing, and I urge you all to be always upstanding and to carry on the legacy. My adopted mother wanted me to become a doctor or a priest, and to follow in the footsteps of the great Albert Schweitzer, the 20th century physician, humanitarian, writer, and philosopher. I may have been inspired by his writings and his humanitarianism, but I had no intention of becoming a physician. Hence, I studied law and economics. I do not think that my mother was disappointed. As a young man studying in England during the colonial days, it was important to demonstrate that those of us from the Caribbean had the ability to achieve success, even among the finest brains at Cambridge. And I set out to do just that. With this in mind, I embraced every opportunity to learn as much as possible about every facet of the law that was presented, often calling on tutors and researching every aspect of the law. This application to research and preparation has remained with me. Those of you who have worked with me know this. Law has been my life. It has helped me in politics and in my private life. I have no regrets about the choice of career. And I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to make a lasting contribution to the jurisprudential landscape of Barbados and to the development of Barbados in general. There are many people who helped me along the way. To name them all would be cumbersome in this setting, but I owe a debt of gratitude to the late Professor Elie Lauterpacht and the late Professor David Yale, two of my lecturers at Cambridge, and the late Sir Jack Dare and Mr. Bruce Brooks of Yarwood and Boyce, who guided me in my early years as an attorney in Barbados. I am sure that they too would welcome this honor. Coming to this renovated complex today has brought a sense of nostalgia. I am sure it was the same for Sir David as well. I am pleased that the government has refurbished the buildings. They have a rich history and many interesting stories. It also triggered great memories this evening. It is part of the Bridgetown Heritage Site. The law has made my life a great journey, and I'm very grateful. I wish to thank you, Attorney General, for organizing this event, and I thank the legal fraternity who worked with me and who continue to engage me in the law. May God continue to bless you. Now, please let me begin my own brief remarks by thanking the government most sincerely for this very generous honor. Sir Henry and I wish publicly to acknowledge the leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Attorney General in ensuring the preservation and renovation of this historic complex. I wish to thank the entire Cabinet of Barbados for their support in this also. In that context, I have to confess that apart from the renaming of the complex, this ceremony has certain poignant memories for me. It was early in 2008 that following the change of government, I sought and obtained the approval of the then Prime Minister and Attorney General, quote, to establish a committee to examine the future use of the Supreme Court complex at Corey Street after that court is relocated to new premises at White Park Road, unquote. I received a reply agreeing to the establishment of the committee. I duly put together a committee of 14 persons, including, I see here, Sir Henry Fraser. And on the 26th of November 2008, we sent a report to the then government. Our overarching conclusion was in these terms, and I quote from the report. The committee considers that retention, rehabilitation, and refurbishment of the existing Supreme Court complex at Corey Street would redound to the benefit of the administration of justice in the several ways outlined at paragraph 14. At the same time, it would preserve an important part of Barbados' architectural and legal history for future generations, unquote. So this evening, I am fortunate to see that that basic recommendation of the committee has come to fruition, albeit with some differences from our specific recommendations in 2008. I must also give thanks, of course, to the Lord, who has preserved and sustained me to this ripe old age, and to be alive to witness and participate in this evening's ceremony. Let me tell you a little story. Once upon a time, there were three men who formed the opposition in the House of Assembly: Sir Henry Ford, Owen Arthur, and David Simmons. Immediately after the general elections of May 1986, our political opponents found amusement at our expense in a nursery rhyme to rechristen us the Three Blind Mice. We took no offense from that derisory appellation. When you are in politics, you should be aware that today's jeers will be tomorrow's cheers. So although Owen is no longer with us, 36 years after those elections and the rechristening, Sir Henry and I have metaphorically had the scales removed from our eyes and regained our sight to enable us to marvel at the beauty of this complex restored and named in our honor. The Lord moves in mysterious ways. And that leads me to say, how happy I am that Sir Henry's name is conjoined with mine on this complex. We have been friends since I first met him during the Constitutional Conference in London in 1966. He opened the doors of his chambers to me when I came home to practice law in 1970. And most of what I have learned about the practice of law, I have learned from Henry. I need not speak about the fact that we were political warriors together for over 25 years. But as much as this event is celebratory of our service to the law, we are nevertheless humbled by the magnitude and magnificence of the honor bestowed upon us. Our families, throughout our long sojourn in the law, have been entirely supportive of our efforts to attain excellence in our profession. There is an aphorism that proclaims, "The law is a jealous mistress." Freely translated, it means that to be a successful lawyer, you must devote the majority of your time and your energies to the law at the expense of all else, even your family. So, I thank my family, especially my children, for their patience and understanding, and indeed their appreciation of my addiction to the law. Of course, as a lawyer herself, my wife needed no persuasion of the truth of the aphorism. But her emotional support, too, gave me the confidence and the freedom to pursue my goals in the discipline of the law and to put into practice my personal philosophy of my role as an attorney at law. As I conceived it, I was rendering a social service, assisting persons who could not represent themselves, or assisting parties in adjusting relationships. In looking back over 52 years in the law in Barbados and another 10 in England, I have too many memories to recount on an occasion such as this, but I share three with you. The magistrates' courts down there were the arenas where I learned, practiced, and refined my skills as an advocate against the three best police prosecutors of the time, indeed of any time. I mean, Henry, Arthur Linton, Douglas Haggard, Courtney Springer, the one with the quaint sobriquet, Johnny Saltbags. Those three were as talented and expert as any seasoned, qualified attorney at law. Coming up a little further to the Supreme Court here, especially High Courts number 3 and 4 at the back. The three W's of the CID of the then Royal Barbados Police Force. Yeah, they had three. Jasper Watson, Sylvester Williams, Keith Whitaker. The three great detectives and equally dangerous police witnesses. They were frequently on the other side of me in assizes. Unfortunately, their success in cracking cases was never replicated when they took me on in a trial. On the civil side, there were many landmark cases, but now is not the time to dilate upon them. But finally, when I swapped the gown of senior counsel for the robes of Chief Justice, it was in the Supreme Court there, the old Town Hall building, that I was able, in a small way, to assist in developing the law, jurisprudence, and the administration of justice. Permit me to acknowledge the support that I received as Chief Justice from many distinguished members of the bar as well as my colleagues on the bench. Let me hasten to add that whatever progress was made in the administration of justice during my tenure was largely due to the work of the Judicial Council, comprised of all the judges and many of the practitioners in that group to whom I just alluded. We met as a collective every 4 to 6 weeks with a formal agenda, identifying issues, and we took steps to resolve them. I'm obliged to the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Attorney General for the lavish encomiums paid to me. But since I believe that a speech should end on the same day that it began, I shall shortly bring these remarks to a close. But not before thanking the contractor, Burcon Construction, and especially the workers who transformed this complex so magnificently. The architect, the interior designers, and Major Headley, the project manager. I think that I can truly say that not only have you produced a work of outstanding brilliance, but you have my assurance that Sir Henry and I are extremely proud to have our names associated with this renovated historic complex. And finally, whoever assigned the various spaces to their new occupants is either a careful student of Barbados' legal history or a person with a facility for mischievousness. The room that is now assigned to me as chairman of the Law Reform Commission is the same space that was occupied by my wife when she was registrar of the Supreme Court and the president. How exceedingly coincidental. But when she looked through the glass door to the registrar's office, the point about that was that she could look straight into my chambers across the room, as if to keep an eye on me. My chambers were in that last building on Pilfour Street, on the top floor. So now when I look through the door of the office of the chair of the Law Reform Commission, all that I would see across the road in the same room is Ralph Thorne QC. No one who represents feminine pulchritude, just Ralph Thorne. And just let me finish by thanking all of you for all that you have said about me. And I wish to assure the Honorable Chief Justice that the Law Reform Commission has started work to bring next year a new Legal Profession Act. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Sir David Simmons and Sir Henry Ford. And before we get to the actual renaming, I'm sure there are so many persons who need to be thanked this evening. And I want to invite now the Director of Legal Services, Ms. Bernadette John, to express thanks.
Your Excellency, Dame Sandra, I'm craving your permission as well to recognize protocol as having been established. Thank you, ma'am. No duty, said James Allen, late 19th century, earliest 20th century philosopher, is more urgent than returning thanks. I don't think he was contemplating the Friday nights to which the Honorable Prime Minister referred, but it is my duty and honor this evening to say thank you to a long list of persons, and I'm going to promise you to be as brief as I can while I do that. Thanks this evening are due to the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance for providing the building to be refurbished and for funding the project. The Design and Implementation Unit of the Office of the Attorney General for providing project management oversight, coordinating, and contract management for the project. Steinbach Management Services for providing on-site project management. Gillespie and Steele Associates, Architectural Services. Cooper Kaufman Consultancy Limited, Quantity Surveyors. ADB Consultants Limited, Mechanical, Electrical, and Plumbing Services. Technic Structure Consultants, Structural Engineering Services. Burkhan Construction, Inc., the main building contractors. Williams Rentals for providing the lighting towers. IGM Stage Lighting for providing staging and decor along with environmental lighting. A&B Music Supplies for providing audio reinforcements. Corbin's Catering Company, the design team for covering the cost of the catering. Sky 7 Graphics for editing the construction videos. Elco Rentals for the tents and accessories. The Barbados Police Service Band, the Barbados Police Service for event security and traffic management. The Barbados Defense Force, their medical unit, for being on standby for us this evening, for providing door openers, the flagpole, and other support. Ms. Diana Clark and the team from the National Conservation Commission for providing and installing the landscaping around the building. Bridgetown Synagogue 1654 Management Company for access to the car park facilities. Gittins and Company for providing and installing the plaque. Prestige Print and Trading Limited, the printers. Thanks are also due to all those of you who have contributed to the program. I am not going to unfairly highlight any one presenter, but thank all of you for your edifying and encouraging remarks this evening. And last but not least, all of you in attendance this evening, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attention, for being a wonderful audience this evening. Thank you.
And that was the Director of the Community Legal Services who did our vote of thanks. Now it is time for the unveiling of a plaque on the building, as well as the renaming of the building. Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to remain in your seats while the official party proceeds. So first we will have the unveiling of the plaque, and that will involve the Prime Minister, Chief Justice Sir Patterson, and the Attorney General, Marshall. I think you should be able to turn your attention to the screens. Okay, so we are also going to have the naming of the complex. And so I also invite Sir David Simmons and Sir Henry Ford to proceed to the area of the plaques. And while that is happening, I invite you to enjoy the music provided by the Barbados Police Service Band. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the Henry Ford and David Simmons Legal and Judicial Complex. Ladies and gentlemen, I will crave your indulgence once again. Following the official renaming, we're going to have a number of tours of the new buildings. So I crave your indulgence to please follow the directions of the ushers because there will be various groups. And our first group will be those who are have already gone forward. And in addition, we will have everyone else who was in the front row and on the right-hand side of the second row, as well as Major Headley, Ms. Jennifer King, and P.S. Goddard. This tour will be led by Ms. Michelle Zambrano. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think everyone will have a chance, but please remain in your seats while the first group has their tour.